can't turn your phone on recording. Oh, there you go. Why can't I return? You're live.
Hello everyone, my name is Heather with Highland Gamel. Welcome to Gamel Facebook Live today. I'm going to show you today how to quilt as you go on your Gamel. So I'm midway through the project so I can show you the different stages. But basically I like Minky because obviously I love to vacuum. So I use Minky a lot. And I know I've used Minky in my other demos, but this is a really fun quick quilt. I started by just loading Minky on the back, and I use poly down batting by Hobbs whenever I am using Minky because I really love how it works with Minky. They're both made of polyester, so neither shrinks and they wash really nicely. So I've layered my backing and my batting, and then I have cut a whole bunch of strips of different various sizes of Minky in colors that go with my main print, which is these llamas. So I just pulled a whole bunch of scraps and I cut them in different widths, just kind of random, anywhere from 4 inches to 11 inches. And I like to cut my focus print a little bit bigger, so it's a little bit wider. And basically at the very top, I just laid my first strip down. And if this were the top of my quilt, I would channel lock at the top and stitch across my very first strip, face up. And then I would take my next strip and just lay it right on top. So if this gray piece were my first strip at the top of my quilt, and this were my second one, I would just lay it right on top, face down, so that I can stitch it and then flip it. So I'll show you how to kind of keep everything together while you're doing that. So when you get your first strip sewn down, I like to kind of give it a tug and place some pins to hold this down. Otherwise you're going to get a little bubble here, because with Minky especially, you need to take a little bit bigger seam allowance than you normally would. You can definitely do this with cotton fabric as well, and it would probably be a little bit easier done with cotton and cotton batting because it would be a little bit thinner. You wouldn't have to fight the puff, the loft. But I do love the loft and the softness of Minky, so this way is kind of fun. So I just put about every 7 or 8 inches, I put a pin, and I'm putting the pins in with the head of the pin toward me so that I can pull them out as I go if I need to. When you're working with Minky, you want to kind of make sure the nap is going the same direction. So that means, you know, then when you pet your quilt, it's all going to be the same. They won't have, you know, in Minky you can write your name in it and things like that. So I always make sure the nap's going the same direction. Very important also when you piece the back of a Minky backing to make sure the nap is going in the same direction too. So I'm going to lay this next strip on top after I've pinned it down. And just kind of line it up with the bottom of that gray piece. And since Minky is stretchy, and typically with this type of quilt we cut strips, we're cutting them on the stretch, so we have to kind of be careful with that stretch. And that's why I'll show you as we go. We may stop and readjust a couple times. I'm going to just put a couple of little pins to hold that top piece in place. And my magnetic pin bowl comes in very handy when I do these quilts. So I'm tethered. All right, so I'm gonna bring my machine down here. And like I said, a little bit bigger seam allowance will make things a lot easier for you. So I give myself about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. I'm gonna go ahead and about 1/2 inch up, I'm going to channel lock. So my machine will move right and left, but not forward and backward. That will give me a nice straight line. So even if my Minky looks like it's crooked or I'm getting a little bit off course, I'm not going to worry about it too much because my stitch will be nice and straight. So I'll take a single stitch, pull up my thread, and I'm going to hang on right here as I get started, maybe give it a little back stitch. But as I go across, my Minky is going to want to slip and slide around a little bit. So I like to kind of have my hand above it and make sure that it doesn't slide down on me. You can see how that stretch is curling up a little bit. That's okay. But with my left hand, I'm just kind of keeping it from sliding too much. I'm going to take this pin out and give it a little, smooth it out a little bit. And then again, just using my left hand, kind of keep that nice and smooth where it's supposed to be. I'm going to stop again and just pull out this pin, straighten this just a little bit, and then go here to the end and stop. Oh, I'll cut my threads, and then with my little pin bowl, I'll take out all the pins that I used to secure that row, and then flip the row down. And you'll see that I don't have any bubbles in this row. It's nice and smooth. And then I'm ready to repeat with this next row, and just like I did with the gray, put the pins in, and about every 8 inches or so across the quilt. And then I'm ready to grab the next piece, and just like I did before, lay it right on top. Of course, make sure the nap is going the right direction. And then I'm ready to do the next row. So you just repeat that until you get to the end of your backing. I like to cut about 2 yards of backing and use the width of the 60 wide minky because it makes a nice throw size quilt, about 60 by 72. I want to unroll this though and show you. I used a larger piece of llama minky in the beginning of the quilt, and it was about 10 inches wide. So I wanted to add a little bit more quilting. So that's always an option, since you are quilting it as you go, and it's going to be completely quilted when you get done. If you want to, or if you have some larger, thicker rows, you can always add some quilting.
You have a question. How did you load the backing minky selvage edges attached to the leaders? Question mark.
I pinned the stretchy side to the leaders. So a lot of times I will, if I use minky a lot, I will mark my leaders 30 inches out from the center so that I know I haven't stretched the minky when I load it. And that way, if I start at the middle and start pinning, not stretch, if I'm stretching it as I pin, I'll exceed that mark for my minky. But I like to pin the stretchy side because then when I roll the quilt, I'm not fighting that stretch. If you pin the selvage edge, then you're stretching it on the as you roll. And if you stretch it too far and then quilt it and then take it off the machine, it can kind of unstretch on you. So you get some bunching up. If minky is pieced up for a large quilt, I will make an exception and pin the selvage edge because I like that seam to go horizontally across my machine. It's easier to work with.
Talk about the sag when you're using minky, like how loose.
So when you're using minky, a little bit looser is better on your machine. Minky, since it stretches one way and not the next, if you're quilting, you're less likely to have any trouble with skip stitches. Oftentimes, if your quilt is on the frame too tight with any fabric, your needle will have a hard time catching the hook and can skip a stitch. But with minky, especially since it doesn't stretch one way, you just want to keep it kind of loose, and you'll see this is kind of bouncy. So if my cameraman can zoom in, you can see that this is a lot of space to leave unquilted. So I just went back and quilted some little flowers in it. They're kind of hard to see with the white minky, but I can always go back if I wanted to add some little loops or something in some of the whiter, or just to add some character, I could do that. Oftentimes when I get to the very end of the quilt, on the very last row, before I flip the last row over, I'll have my backing and my batting, and I will stitch their name in backwards because it will stitch frontwards on the back side of the minky, and it will show up really cute. I do that on my Statler with the computer. Just place the letters backwards, stitch it in. Then when I flip that top piece over, it's covered up and you don't see their name stitched backwards on the top, but it's cute to have their name or You can do a whole little tag, you know, made with love by grandma or something on the back before you flip that last piece over. Any more questions on Quilt As You Go on your machine, on your Gamel long arm? All right, if you have any other questions, feel free to comment. Tag me in your comments so that I can see them and answer them. Heather Cartwright with Highland Gamel, and thank you for joining me today. Have fun.